Today I'm going to be talking about 7 countries where I felt safe solo traveling as a brown woman and 4 countries where I did not. Hi guys, I'm Triya. Today I want to talk about my experiences as a brown woman. Let's get into it. The first country I want to talk about is Japan. Japan is an amazing, beautiful place with so much culture and heritage and great food. I think Japan comes up quite often on these types of lists because it really is so safe and it feels like a very welcoming country for visitors. Especially in places like Tokyo, you can wear whatever you want and no one bats an eyelid because everyone's doing their own thing. As a woman traveling on her own, it feels very safe no matter what the time of day or night. For me, I would often leave my bags and my suitcases outside of a convenience store because sometimes it's difficult to take your bags inside if it's so crowded. I would feel really safe in leaving my possessions outside the shop because I wasn't worried about them getting stolen. Obviously, you have to be careful if you spend a lot of time in Japan and then you move to another country, you can't be so complacent about your things. Like my mum, when she went on her solo trip to Japan, she went out for a walk in the middle of the night in Tokyo, I think around 3 a.m, and she felt so safe. And even though obviously many places, especially in big cities in Japan, they can be very crowded, but I never felt like my personal space was being invaded. No one ever pushed into me or anything like that. So in that respect, it was really good as well. The only time when I was ever approached by anyone who was acting kind of drunk was in Osaka, in one of the main busy streets, and actually this was a drunk British tourist, so it was just a reminder of home. Another thing that I definitely thought about before I started traveling around Asia was what would be the experience of a brown person, and for me, my experience in Japan was really good. No one really stared at me at all. One of my close friends is black and she's travelled all around Japan and she does get stared at, but mainly outside of the cities, in the more rural areas. But I think in the cities you'll be fine. Okay, the next place I want to talk about that I felt super safe and comfortable in was South Korea. This is another place where it's very common for people to leave their possessions. For example, you might leave your phone and your laptop on a table at a cafe and then go and order or go to the loo, and that's totally normal. I felt pretty safe to walk around outside alone by myself in Seoul. So I've been to Korea a few times, and the place that I stayed most recently was in Hongdae, and it was in a very secluded back alley. It was a basement apartment and I didn't exactly know where it was when I was booking it. And despite the fact it was in a back alley and there was not much lighting, I still felt very safe coming back in the middle of the night, and that's just a testament to the place, I think. Obviously, I don't recommend staying in some place like that, especially if it's your first time traveling solo, but in this case I was really fortunate that nothing went wrong. I've generally had really good experiences with the locals in Seoul as well, especially, for example, like I try out some of my Korean on mainly the older people who are working in convenience stores and things like that, and they're always very polite and friendly and very willing to help you. One thing I would say about Korea though is one time I spent about a week in Japan and then I went to Korea for a week, and I did sort of feel a bit of a culture shock going from Japan to Korea, specifically just for things like queuing and crowds. This is just my personal opinion and my personal experience, but I felt like in Japan, even though it was very crowded, no one got up into your personal space at all, and everyone was very orderly following queues and things. And although they are like this in Korea, it's not to the same extent as the people in Japan, so it can feel a little bit different. Obviously, it's nothing like rush hour in London. If you can survive something like that, then you'll be absolutely fine. The next place I want to talk about that I felt really safe at was Germany. Actually, my first ever completely solo trip was to Berlin. I think it's a really good place to go, especially if you're from Europe or the UK, and so it's not that far away from home. Berlin and most other cities in Germany are really easy to navigate and get around, and often lots of people speak English very well, so if you don't speak any German, then that's okay. And one thing I want to mention is a lot of the places that I went to while solo traveling were big cities, and I think if you're worried about solo traveling, it's really good to go to a big city or go to a place that's popular, just because you'll be well connected, you know, there's lots of other people around, there's always a place to go, and there's always a place to get help, so you're not going to be stranded out in the middle of the forest or on top of a mountain or something like that. The next country that I felt really safe solo traveling to was Taiwan. I found that the people were all super friendly to me. For example, in restaurants, everyone was very happy and willing to describe all the different food items on the menu and give me their recommendations. One thing that's really popular in Taiwan and neighbouring countries are the night markets. So that's when you can go to a market in the night, you can walk around, experience street food and shopping. And obviously the key is in the name, it's a night market. But I was able to walk around the night markets in Taipei very freely. I didn't feel unsafe, and also, you know, sometimes when you're walking around a certain street or something like that, you feel like you have to be very possessive of your belongings. You have to clutch your bag to you because you feel unsafe. I didn't get that at all. Obviously, you don't want to be naive as a traveler and you want to be careful about your belongings. But I did feel safe to get out my purse and pay in cash and things like that. The next place I want to talk about is Malaysia. On my solo traveling trip around Asia, I went and spent a bit of time in Kuala Lumpur. I really loved this city and I felt really comfortable. The only thing that made me feel uncomfortable was actually the heat. I went in April and it was so hot, but despite that, it was an amazing country. If you're a brown person and you're worried about sticking out in different countries, then I would say Malaysia is a good place to start because it's very diverse and there's lots of other South Asian people there. So you're not going to stick out at all. I mean, I would generally say that most of these big cities are very diverse and people don't really stare at you. They don't overtly treat you differently. That being said, going to somewhere like Malaysia, you'll definitely see a lot of people like you. So that's nice as well. Like I said, when I was solo traveling, I mainly stuck to the cities. So I spent a lot of time in KL, but I didn't explore the rest of Malaysia. I know that there are a lot of solo travelers that are very adventurous and go to a lot of smaller places and do more exciting things, but I feel like big cities have so much charm and so much culture and there's so much you can do in them, and I feel like sometimes they are overlooked. So definitely I recommend going to big cities. And the next country I want to talk about that I felt very safe going to was Switzerland. Obviously Switzerland is a very beautiful place. There's so much nature. The cities themselves are very beautiful and clean. I went to Geneva. I felt very safe walking around late in the night. The only thing that I would say about Geneva in particular, maybe this is the same for other Swiss locations as well, is that it was very expensive. I think the cost of living is really high in Switzerland, so that was a bit of a shock. Even fast food places were so much more inflated than they are in the UK, which is really saying something. And the final country I want to talk about that made me feel super safe while solo traveling is China. China was actually the first stop on my solo travels, and before I went on the plane, I had a little bit of a freak out the night before. I suddenly thought to myself, how am I going to navigate? How am I going to use the internet? You know, there's no Google, there's no YouTube, there's no Google Maps, there's no WhatsApp. Like, what am I going to do? I don't have a VPN. How am I going to get around? Whilst these concerns are fair enough, they were definitely not needed. I mean, I felt so safe and comfortable when I got there. Doing a bit of preparation before you go is really essential. So I had downloaded the right apps on my phone before I went, and that really helped me. It was so easy to use public transport in Shanghai, and it was also so easy to pay because I just installed this app and I put my card on it beforehand and I could pay everyone with a QR code. So I didn't need to get out cash or get out a card. I just had everything on my phone. And in order to navigate, I think Google Maps does work to a certain extent, but it's not as updated as some other navigation apps. So these were the ones that I used and they really helped me actually. And Shanghai is a very diverse and metropolitan city. So there's lots of different types of people there coming for business, coming for leisure and things like that. So I didn't feel uncomfortable. I didn't feel stared at. It actually wasn't my first time in China. I remember going to Beijing with my family a long time ago in about 2016 or 2017. And I remember then I felt a little bit stared at. Like, we were a family of 4 brown people in Beijing and people looked at us, mainly kids, but still it felt a little bit weird to be stared at like that. But in Shanghai, I did not get any of that. So I don't know if that's just a Shanghai thing, but yeah, what a beautiful city. So those are the countries that I felt really safe traveling in. Now I'm going to talk about the 4 countries that I felt less safe traveling in. One of the countries that I feel less safe traveling in is India. I'm Bengali and I have a lot of family living in India and I go back there very often. Mostly I go with my parents and my sister and we visit family, but on some occasions I have traveled by myself. I have to say though, I've never been completely by myself, staying on a hotel by myself and doing everything, just because certainly my parents wouldn't feel comfortable if I did that alone in India. The times that I have been sort of solo traveling in India has been mainly where I'm staying with family and then going out during the day by myself. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that I would feel safe or my parents would be happy with me traveling completely solo around India as a woman. I think that also your experience of traveling around India does depend on what you look like. I know some people who are white and they've traveled around India and they've had a very different experience to people who are brown. And I know that people who are white often talk about getting a lot of unwanted attention, being stared at constantly. I do think that the culture of being stared at is there for everyone. I know that I get stared at and my sister gets stared at a lot when we go to India. I do think that your race impacts how much unwanted attention you get. But that being said, I'm lucky that I've never had any really bad experiences in India traveling. I do think it's possible to really enjoy India and really have a great time traveling in a pair or a group. But one thing I will say is that it's important that you be sensible. For example, if you're from the UK and you're traveling, then good accommodation is really affordable out there actually. And I know a lot of people who go traveling into India, say on their gap year, and they're on a budget. Because they're on a budget, they end up staying in accommodation that unfortunately isn't very safe or isn't very secure. And I don't know why people put themselves through that kind of risk when actually good, safe accommodation is more affordable. Unfortunately, we do live in a society where women have to take precautions to look after themselves. So I think that if you are sensible and you're with someone else, it is possible to go out in India, but I wouldn't feel safe doing it alone. The next country I want to talk about that I didn't feel safe in is Italy. Now, I've been to Italy several times and mostly have had really amazing experiences. Like, it's such a beautiful country with great food and lots of great culture. The second solo trip I ever did was to Rome. I chose that city because the flights were very cheap and obviously it's an amazingly beautiful city. But when I went, everyone warned me, be really careful of your possessions, keep everything so close to you because there's such a high chance that you're going to get mugged or you're going to get your things stolen. Even when I went to cafes and stuff like that, the waiters and the waitresses were like, oh, you're traveling by yourself, like be so careful. So I spent the whole 4 or 5 days that I was there in Italy being really careful with my things and being really worried. Like, I spent the whole time really worried that something was going to happen. And nothing happened until the last day when I had my backpack, I had my side bag, had all the stuff because I checked out from the hotel, and I was making my way back to the airport and I was about to get onto the metro and it was crazy. It was so busy. There were so many people on the platform of the metro screaming and shouting, like holding the doors open. It was just chaos. As I tried to get onto the metro, that's when I realised that my phone had gotten stolen. It happened in less than a second. I didn't even realise that it happened. 1 second I had it and the next second it was gone. Luckily, I had my passport and my wallet with me separate to my phone. I didn't have one of those phones that has a case with everything in, which I think is so dangerous. I was able to find my way by following signs and things to the airport, and I managed to luckily to make it back to England. But as I was speaking to someone in the airport, they said that this happens a lot and the metro is often where people get their things stolen. Had I known that, I would have been extra careful on the metro. But I mean, I did still think I was being careful. These things happen. But ever since then, I bought a strap for my phone so that I keep it attached to my wrist, and now it's really useful to use in London as well because a lot of phone snatchings happen in London. But another thing that I always do is keep a spare card, like a credit card and some cash, in a different bag in my suitcase just in case something like this happens, because you don't want to be stranded with no money. Another thing I did when I went on my solo trip around Asia, because that was a couple of months I was going to be gone, is I took a spare phone. Lying around our house we have a couple of really old smartphones, so I took one of those and put a pay-as-you-go SIM in and just kept that switched off in my suitcase just in case my phone got stolen. Let's say my phone gets stolen the first week that I'm away, I would then have to survive weeks without a phone. Thankfully this time in Asia nothing happened, but I'd rather be prepared. The next country I want to talk about that I didn't feel that safe in was Spain. I've been to Spain many times as well, and it is a beautiful country. So I usually go to Spain with family, and one time I went with one of my friends and it was just 2 of us girls going to Madrid. And although we had a really great time, we got catcalled constantly, every day, just from walking from the hotel out and about or anywhere, almost constantly catcalled. And I've never experienced that in any other country, really. I don't know if this was just specifically a Madrid thing. Obviously, this is just personal experience, but I've just never felt harassment like that. And the final country I want to talk about that I didn't feel that safe in was the USA. I went to California last December, and whilst I didn't personally have any bad experiences, I just felt constantly on edge, knowing everything about American politics and about the everyday experiences of people. It just meant that I was constantly anxious during the trip. I am really glad I went, and I did have a great time, but I probably wouldn't go back. Definitely not for a few years. So those are all the countries I wanted to talk about. I hope that this helps to inform you if you're planning a trip. Did you have any experiences? Do you agree or not with what I've said? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.